Thank you, Mr. Grabowski. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see everybody. We've actually been gone for 3 weeks now, I think. So it's very good to be back, and all the snow gone and disappeared, and temperatures are pleasant for this time of year. Looking back at the year 2022, it saw the Chapmans buy not one, but 2 new used cars. It also saw us buy and sell our old house and buy a new house, with all 3 of these purchases coming in about a span of 4 months. Now, obviously, these are some very big decisions to make in a short amount of time, even though we had been looking for a house since March. And with that came thoughts and emotions, aka stress, such as, is this a good idea? Can we really afford this? Are we being content? Are we coveting? So for this message, I would like to dive into one of these emotions a bit more in depth to get a better understanding and to be better protected from it and to be able to identify it if it's in our lives. And we'll also finish up our car and house buying expo at the end of this message here. So what I have chosen to look at is coveting. My title, Beware of Coveting, or Covetousness. Let's go to Exodus chapter 20 and verse 17. Exodus 20 and verse 17. This is where God gives the commandment that you shall not covet in his 10 commandments. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 17. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. On the surface, this seems pretty straightforward. And it is. You can link coveting your neighbor's wife to the 7th commandment, which is not to commit adultery. And if you were to covet his servants because maybe they are better workers than yours, you might be willing to try and steal them perhaps, which would then be breaking the 8th commandment, you shall not steal. At this point, I'd like to take a look directly at the word covet because we have more than one version of the word. We also have coveted, coveting, coveteth, covetous, and covetousness as well. And they all share similar meanings. Here are some of those meanings. Greedy, or to gain greedily. Desire earnestly. Envy. Jealousy. Lust. And with emphasis, to set your heart upon. Keep this last one in mind as it will prove very important when I begin to draw to a close. Let's take a look at coveting in action, shall we? But if only we had a story from the Bible. Maybe from the Old Testament, perhaps? Possibly there was a king who coveted. Ah, yes. King Ahab. Y'all thought I was going to talk about King David and Bathsheba, didn't you? I purposely stayed away from that. It would have fit in here perfectly, but we go there all too often. So let's come there with me, if you will, to 1 Kings chapter 21 and verse 1. 1 Kings chapter 21 and verse 1. It's titled in my Bible, Naboth is murdered for his vineyard. Now, while you're going there, by no means was King Ahab a righteous king, and his wife Jezebel, she was neither. So, but I think we can gather from this story some very important details. So in 1 Kings chapter 21, verse 1, and it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel next to the place of Ahab, king of Samaria. So Ahab spoke to Naboth, saying, give me your vineyard, that I may have it for a vegetable garden, because it is near to my house. And for it I will give you a vineyard better than it. Or if it seems good to you, I will give you its worth in money. I don't know about you, but if you're going to covet your neighbor's land, you might want to get some better people skills. To lead off a conversation saying, give me your vineyard, that would put a sour taste in my mouth immediately. Then he follows it up with, I will give you a better vineyard. Sounds like a cheap sales pitch to me. But Naboth said to Ahab, we'll pick it back up in verse 3, the Lord forbid that I should give the inheritance of my fathers to you. And we're about to see, here is where unchecked, unrepented covetousness can spiral out of control because King Ahab didn't beware of covetousness. So Ahab went to his house sullen. Now this word can mean bad-tempered, sulky, gloomy, or depressed. I know we don't use the word sullen very often anymore, at least I don't. And displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. For he said, I will not give you the inheritance of my father. And he lay down on his bed and turned his face and would not eat no food. Here we can already see the effects of coveting having on Ahab's mental health and overall attitude. They have deteriorated. He's extremely upset on how things went with Naboth and has confined himself to his room and won't eat either. Let's face it, he is in full temper tantrum mode right now. But unfortunately, as we're about to read, instead of turning from covetousness, his covetousness will continue to blind him, and things will continue to get worse because of it. Picking it up in verse 5, but Jezebel, his wife, came to him and said to him, why is your spirit so sullen that you eat no food? He said to her, because I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite and said to him, give me your vineyard for more money, or else, if it pleases you, I will give you another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give you my vineyard. Then Jezebel, his wife, said to him, you now exercise authority over Israel. Arise, eat food, and let your heart be cheerful. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. And she wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters to the elders and the nobles who were dwelling in the city with Naboth. She wrote in the letters, saying, proclaim a fast, and seat Naboth with high honor among the people. And seat 2 men, scoundrels, before him to bear witness against him, saying, you have blasphemed God and the king. Then take him out and stone him that he may die. So now Ahab's wife gets involved and begins acting on the king's behalf to have this man killed, breaking the 6th commandment, you shall not kill, and convinces and conceives for him to be seated by 2 scoundrels, and she, in her letter, puts, bear witness. But we know it as breaking the 9th commandment, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And unfortunately for Naboth, the plot to take his life will be brought to fulfillment, as we are about to read. So the men of his city, the elders and nobles who lived in the city, did as Jezebel had sent word to them. Just as it was written in the letters which she sent them, they proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth at the head of the people. Then 2 worthless men came in and sat before him, and the worthless men testified against him, even against Naboth before the people, saying, Naboth cursed God and the king. So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death with stones. Then they sent word to Jezebel, saying, Naboth has been stoned and is dead. When Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned and was dead, Jezebel said to Ahab, arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give you for money, for Naboth is not alive but dead. When Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, Ahab arose to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. Just like that, with the snap of your fingers, Ahab was feeling better. No more depression, no more bad temper. Gets up, takes possession of his neighbor's vineyard. A man, his wife murdered, and he was fully aware of what she was doing and did not disapprove. Where was God in all this? We never seen King Ahab mention God or go to God in prayer in all the tragic events that led to Naboth's death. But as the story continues, God did see what happened, and God sent the prophet Elijah to him to condemn Ahab and his house and his wife Jezebel. But upon hearing this, Ahab has a change of heart. He tore his clothes, put sackcloth on, fasted, and went about mourning. He humbled himself before God, and God took note of that and didn't bring the calamity upon him, but instead it would come upon King Ahab's son's house. Now keep in mind, King Ahab and Jezebel were not good people, but in this instance, King Ahab's humbling before God did spare him some of the calamity upon his house at the time. But there were certain predictions that did get fulfilled about his death and Jezebel's death. So what happened to King Ahab that his covetousness almost brought him to ruins? Covetousness gives us a case of misplaced priorities. Remember, one of the meanings of covetousness was to set your heart upon. King Ahab obviously done just this. His heart was set upon getting the vineyard so bad that nothing else mattered. We need to be very careful if our hearts become set upon anything on this earth, that it would replace God in our hearts. And as we will see in just a minute, that setting your heart on something you're coveting is idolatry. Let's go to Colossians chapter 3 and read verses 1 through 5. That was Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. Therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desires, and covetousness, which is idolatry. In closing, I'd like to go back, as I promised, that we would finish up our experience with buying a new house and 2 new cars. So as we've seen, keeping God in the forefront is going to be the most important things in our lives. This is nothing new, not new teaching. And some of our experience is the same stuff you guys would probably do as well. And as we all should, this is just advice and refreshing memories on it, that in making these decisions, we should go to prayer. Always have prayer. And we did. We asked God that if this was the right house, open the door. If it wasn't, close that door. And like I said, we looked for a house for 5 months. We put offers in on 2 houses, didn't get them, and I'm actually thankful for that. Those doors were closed. Another thing to kind of keep in mind, we got approved for the house. Banks don't know that you tithe. Take that, do the math, take that out. And even with that, I still wasn't comfortable with the number I was looking at. That number was very high for what I was comfortable with. So do the math, take your tithe out, and The house that we ended up getting, we thought would go for more. It actually sold for a little bit over asking. We got a really good deal on the house, I think. And another thing that I was wanting to go into the house with was 20% down. Obviously, the housing market is inflated, so we had excess money in our house that we were able to, after we sold, take down, put 20% down, which is a nice down payment, which will bring down the money financed. That'll bring that down lower as well. And we had enough money left over that we could pay one of those cars off as well. So that was another good thing as well. So do your math as well. Pray to God for wisdom and understanding in the right direction. So, and we can avoid covetousness if you keep God in the forefront, at the very front. So in closing, I would like to give you a scripture to help remind us all and to give just a little bit more good advice. And for that, we will be reading in closing from 1 Timothy 6, chapter 6, and verse 27. That was 1 Timothy chapter 6. I'm sorry, it is chapter 6, starting in verse 6, not 27. My phone's telling me the end of the verse. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6. We'll be reading through verse 11. Now godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and are a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. But you, O man of God, flee these things and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, and gentleness.